I never drank and I never did drugs and I never smoked, and I'm here to tell a story. They always ask me what to tell young people about their careers. Do it right, do it straight, and do it because you love it. I love you. Good night. Thank you.
Luther Vandross was a multi-talented singer, songwriter, and record producer who was highly revered in black music, known for his velvety baritone voice over classic slow jams. You put on some Luther when you plan a nice romantic evening indoors with your lover. And by the year 2000, he had released 12 studio albums and sold over 20 million records as a solo artist. He was being honored at events like BET's Walk of Fame and Soul Train's Quincy Jones Award for the Outstanding Career Achievements. Both events showcased several big names covering his classic hits. By now, Luther was in the legendary lane, with multiple greatest hits packages indicating a farewell from the prime of his career and proper send-off into retirement. But Luther was somewhat dissatisfied with the level of success he had achieved after 20 years as a solo artist and 30 years in the music business altogether. He felt like he had been typecasted in music, branded as just an R&B balladeer, unable to break the threshold and cross over into popular music the way other black acts who originated in R&B were able to. He noticed how many of their albums sold tens of millions of copies, while only a few of his were lucky enough to break 2 million. And while he had fans across all ethnic and musical backgrounds, every award he won up to this point had been in the R&B category. Also, when it came time for business opportunities, he wasn't being offered what he was worth. He was looked at as being just another old school black act who graced the covers of many Jet and Ebony magazines, but was often overlooked when it came time to be featured on GQ or Rolling Stone covers. And it hadn't helped that his last few albums hadn't produced the big top 40 hits on the Hot 100. He ended up leaving Epic Records, his label of 15 years, back in the mid-90s after he felt his career had become stagnant, and signed a deal with Virgin Records to release his album I Know in 1998, which would go on to become his lowest selling album, and the only one that didn't go platinum. Not to mention, hip-hop had taken over the music scene for the 99 and the 2000s, and even some of the greatest singers to come out of R&B in the 80s found themselves on the back burner by this time. But Luther wasn't done just yet. He had a few more hits on the horizon, and one in particular would elevate him to the forefront, breaking the barrier and becoming the massive crossover hit that would ultimately be his last. And in today's episode of the Era Defined series, we will detail the last 5 years of Luther Vandross, exploring his venture with J Records, the singles, the accolades, the health complications, his unfortunate demise, and the legacy he leaves behind. And I'll be highlighting each of his last achievements along the way. If there are any other artists whose era you'd like to see covered on this channel, please leave your suggestions in the comments below. Let's get started. At the turn of the century, Luther had dropped from over 300 pounds in weight down to 195, was knocking on 50 years old, but was in great shape. Unfortunately, his dramatic weight loss had led to some nasty rumors. Luther said, "I lost 114 pounds, and people speculated as to whether I'm sick or dead. There was a rumor that I was dead, a real live rumor. Everyone was calling me. Patti LaBelle, Barry Whitecall from Monte Carlo, Richard Marx, everyone called, concerned. I don't know how that stuff happens, but I've never been healthier." Now at this time he had been on tour with Boyz II Men, but hadn't made any new moves musically since he left Virgin Records after the disappointment of his last album's era. Now as I stated before, Luther was determined to break back out onto the music scene with a bang, and he knew just the man to assist him, music mogul Clive Davis, who he'd known for years, and who just so happened to be breaking and creating a new label of his own called J Records. So it was a new beginning for them both. Luther said, "I'm signing with Clive Davis's new company. I'm the first one to sign." As he chuckled, he said, "I'm so happy." He had waited for the scenario with Virgin to run its course and for this new deal to develop correctly, and said it was worth the wait. "I'm an enormous fan of Clive Davis. He loves music, he loves success, and I'm more than proud to align myself with him." Now Clive would later say, "Simply put, Luther Vandross is the best male R&B singer in the world. It's an honor that he chose me and J Records, and we will do everything we can to make sure that his music is heard." Okay then. And he would get fast to work on his 13th album, which would be self-titled to reflect who he is as an artist and where he's at in his life. For this album, he would get the opportunity to work alongside many musical talents like John B., RL from Next, The Underdogs, Eddie F., and Darren Lighty, among others. This process would span about 5 months, and in that time span, he'd make a few appearances, like showcasing his vocals alongside other new J Records acts at Clive Davis's pre-Grammy party. and also celebrated his own 50th birthday bash on April 20th, 2001. He had a nice yacht party with an over-the-top floral bouquet cake, just showing out, you hear me? And 4 days later, he would release the lead single from his 13th album, titled Take You Out.
I wouldn't let her get away, not until she heard me say, excuse me, miss, but what's your name? Where are you from? And can I come? And possibly, can I take you out tonight to a movie, to the park? Have you home before it's dark? So let me know, can I take you out tonight? That's why I had to come over and introduce myself to you, 'cause you're never gonna know where you'll find love.
A delightful tune, this song marked a departure from his usual slow jams, and it was per Clive's request. The song was co-written and produced by Warren Baby Dub Campbell, and Clive brought it over to Luther and in so many words was like, I know you write and produce much of your own stuff, but do this one for me as the lead single and you'll be rewarded tenfold. And I can't lie, Clive had the ear for a smash hit, and this song would shoot all the way to number 1 on the US Adult R&B Songs chart, and number 7 on the R&B Hip Hop Songs chart, and number 26 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming his first top 40 since Endless Love with Mariah Carey back in 1994. Luther was back at it, and audiences loved the song's message as it was putting fellas on to how to approach women the right way. All the grown folks was bobbing to it, and even some of the young cats too. Now the song's official all-star remix was placed over Snoop Dogg's Lay Low instrumental, released around the same time, proving that Luther can keep up with the times. He would then appear on 106 & Park to promote the song and its new video, introducing younger audiences to his music. Though they were likely conceived to his music, but that's a whole nother story. Now, the song's music video would feature Garcelle Beauvais as his love interest who he asks out, and the pair would be seen going on different spots, spending quality time together. The video was shot in Malibu and captured some of its beautiful beach scenes that could have been featured on any getaway brochure. It was nice, tasteful, and classy, right on brand with Luther's image. The video also featured his good friend NBA champ John Sally. The video was released ahead of the album itself, which dropped on Juneteenth, and was described by critics as his most engaging, exciting, and compelling album in years. And we finna get into these cuts one time for your mind. The album's opener, of course, was Take You Out, but track 2, Grown Things, produced by John B., had a nice little 2-step groove to it. And it's the type of song that grown folks would have playing in the background while they're getting dressed and getting ready to go, while the kids gotta stay at home with the sitter or get sent to their grandma's, whichever works best. Now from this point in the album, I noticed a pattern moving forward of one upbeat song followed by 2 ballads. Grown Things was more upbeat, therefore track 3 would be the ballad called Bring Your Heart to Mine, which was about a woman in a relationship with a man who's just using her, with lyrics that read, just because he wants to make love doesn't mean he's in love with you. Luther explains that he's the one who truly loves her and will wait as long as he can for her, as he has plans for her. A beautiful song indeed. It was co-written by RL of the group Next, and DJ KG from Naughty by Nature, who also co-produced the track. It would only get a promo release in Europe, but this song, along with many others from this album, could have easily been featured in any romance film in the 2000s. Track 4, Can Heaven Wait, would be released as the album's official second single. Co-written by Joe, the song describes a man who gets the news that his woman has been involved in an accident, and she's looking like she's not gonna make it. In the song, Luther is begging God, can heaven wait just one more night, expressing that he was sorry for taking her for granted, and he'd shoot a music video for this song, with Garcelle reprising her role as his leading lady, whose physical body in the hospital is in critical condition, but whose spirit is following Luther as he expresses his remorse and that he'd give anything to switch places with her. And miraculously, she's healed. And oddly enough, this music video would be the last music video that he would shoot for one of his songs. And I say that because at the time of filming, he had also made a cameo appearance in Angie Stone's music video for Brother. Now, Can Heaven Wait, in its original form, was a minor hit, peaking at number 63 on the R&B hip-hop charts, but the song would be given numerous dance mixes, which became more popular than the original version, boosting the song to number 3 on the dance charts. Track 5, Say It Now, picks up where the last song leaves off, and its lyrics indicate that heaven couldn't wait, and that his lover did pass away. And now he's warning listeners to tell your loved one that you love them today. Don't wait because tomorrow isn't promised. But in keeping with the album's pattern, This song is more upbeat and makes you want to dance, believe it or not. Track 6, Hearts Get Broken All the Time, but the problem is, This Time It's Mine, was described as the ultimate heartbreak anthem, with top-notch production by Luther himself, who also co-wrote the song. It quickly became a fan favorite, and one thing that was a constant in much of Luther's music was the presence of his female background vocalists, which consisted of singers like Tawatha Ag, who is a member of Mtume, who you may know from their smash hit Juicy Fruit. But she did background work for so many artists. Another famous singer who was a background vocalist for Luther was Cissy Houston, who today's generation knows her for being Whitney Houston's mother, but Cissy was a force to be reckoned with, best believe that. And on this track, like with many other Luther tracks, them background vocalists were killing it. Track 7, I'd Rather, expresses a realization that true love is irreplaceable, and the lyrics, I'd rather have bad times with you than good times with someone else, I'd rather be beside you in a storm than safe and warm by myself, resonated with so many of its listeners, and it would be released as the album's third single, becoming a top 20 hit on Billboard's Adult Contemporary chart and shooting straight to number 1 on the Adult R&B Songs chart, becoming an even bigger hit than the second single. And although this song got much airplay on the radio and was one that Luther would perform often, it didn't receive its full promotion or a video, and it would be the last single from the album, and it was released as a single on April 16, 2002, just 1 year before everything fell apart for Luther, but more on that later. After the last two songs that were ballads, track 8, How Do I Tell Her, is an upbeat yet trifling track, where Luther finds himself in a panic because he don't love her no more, which was a complete 180 to the loyal, triumphant longevity in the relationship displayed on the last track, and he kept it real, this time with lyrics like, how do I tell her I don't want to be here anymore? Nothing she did, I just don't feel the way I did before. So much for Forever. Track 9 was a cover of Chuck Jackson's Any Day Now, and like with all of Luther's covers, his version was so enchanting that it earned him a Grammy nomination for Best Traditional R&B Vocal Performance at the 2003 Grammys, though he ended up losing to Aretha Franklin for the song Wonderful. Track 10, If I Was the One, written by Diane Warren and produced by the Underdogs, in many ways echoed the sentiments of track 3, where Luther is promising the woman that he'd treat her far better than the man she's with, except this time the man is his best friend. This song would also appear on the Dr. Dolittle soundtrack. But a little known fact is that Luther wasn't the first to cover this song. Other R&B acts like Rough Ends and Ricky Jones had done their versions first, but Luther's version was the best in my opinion. Track 11, Let's Make Tonight the Night, is the album's party track, where Luther is courting his significant other, being chivalrous but also suggesting that tonight be the night that they fall in love. Produced by Eddie F. and Darren Lighty, this track is a standout feel-good joint. There's something about his collaborations with these two that just works every time. This song was also released ahead of the album, appearing as the B-side to the Take You Out Tonight single. Track 12, Like I'm Invisible, speaks to how he's being treated in the relationship, and we've all been there. This track he co-produced with Babyface, but it's the next track, Are You There With Another Guy? That is my personal favorite on the album. Now this song is a cover of Diane's hit Are You There With Another Girl, but the music on her version is lively and somewhat playful. And I love every bit of it, mind you. But Luther slows things all the way down on his version, and you can really feel the emotions associated with standing on the doorstep outside your lover's crib, thinking you might be hearing some other man inside. And I love the instrumentation on this one. The beat, the guitar solo, the backing vocalist, the Papa Pity the Girl echoes that they took from the original. This song brings the elements of smooth jazz and R&B together beautifully. Track 14, Love Forgot, listed as the last track, is a brilliant work of art, so complex that you might actually miss the song's message. Learn to love and you learn to survive. Co-produced by Luther, the production value on this one, I can't even put into words. It was the best way to close the album. Although select editions of this album would contain a hidden track right at the end called You Really Started Something, which is another party track. This one was produced by Junior Vasquez, who was notable for his house music production to popular hits. He would use the instrumentation from his house remix of Shantae Moore's hit Straight Up for this one, and everyone who heard this bonus track loved it. I think even Dionne Warwick covered it a few years back if I'm not mistaken. But all in all, this album was a solid effort from Luther, and upon its release it debuted at number 6 on the Billboard 200, selling 136,000 copies in its first week, which for him was his best first week sales at that point, as Luther's albums had a history of being slow burners, where its record sales increased over a long period of time. Add to the fact that Billboard had only begun using SoundScan to track sales starting in 1991, when Luther was already 7 albums into his career. But this 2001 album would be certified platinum in just 4 months, and the fans and critics rallied around Luther, who was back, and this time is personal, with that self-titled. BBC Music noted that with this album, Luther has stepped into the 21st century with style. He's combined his classic soul sound with a new digitized R&B beat, therefore cleverly pleasing his die-hard fans and also paving the way for a new generation of followers. AllMusic found that this album was a return to form and shows Luther in step with changing times, all the while still managing to hold on to the essence of what made him so famous in the first place. But not everyone shared in the revelry. Pop Matters called the album a dismal attempt to remain relevant to today's listening audiences, and others felt that much of the instrumentation at this stage in his career felt overproduced, hampering his vocal performance on some songs where they may have anticipated, extended riffs or something. Hell, everybody's got their tastes.
We hear so many young artists today, they feel like they have to over-sing a song. We hear them trying to show their range on a song. They're going back and forth.
They do?
You restrain yourself. Do you have to fight to restrain yourself?
You know what? I never had a problem with sometimes I always think that singers who do that are not really secure with the beauty of their own voices. See, I never had a problem with the sound of my own voice. I never felt that I had to do too much, you know? So sometimes less is more. A lot of times the less you sing, the more romantic it is, you know?
But despite the naysayers, Luther moved along the tide with ease and would go on a full promo tour, performing the lead single and taking the classics with him too. He'd appear on Good Morning America on August 21st, 2001 in New York City for my favorite performance of this entire era, where at the end he had to take it all the way back to the beginning with Never Too Much. One thing I loved about this era was that Luther remained humble in lending his voice and presence to other acts in the business. The day his album dropped was the day of the very first BET Awards, where he would perform one of Whitney Houston's hits in tribute to her. And in her famous speech afterwards, she made sure to mention him.
Luther, what can I say? Luther's singing for me. Oh my God, I have known him since I was 11 years old. He is my brother. There is nobody like Luther. Nobody does it like Luther, so don't forget that, okay? Nobody.
He would do the same at the Soul Train Lady of Soul Awards alongside Ron Isley in their tribute for Patti LaBelle. Lastly, he would appear alongside Usher in 98 Degrees for Man in the Mirror, a tribute to Michael Jackson for his 30th anniversary celebration in Madison Square Garden in New York City on September 10th, 2001. It was a great night, but tragedy would strike the city the very next morning when the famous Twin Towers were struck by airplanes in the deadliest terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Luther, who lived in the city his whole life, said in an interview with Craig Seymour, "I was asleep and a friend called me and told me to turn on CNN. My mother lives near the Twin Towers, so I had to go down there. But they weren't letting you drive past 14th Street, so I had to walk. And there was so much dust and so many particles in the air, it was intense." He later said that he was able to get to her, but knowing that the dust that he was inhaling contained the cremation of human people really put things into perspective. Craig then asked him, "In the past, you've talked about your fear of flying. Have recent events, and even the death of Aaliyah in a plane crash, intensified that fear?" And Luther replied, "Well, my fear of flying was never that rational. It was downright phobia. And I heed the whole suggestion that we need to get back to business as usual. We have to get back to going out and going to restaurants and going to the movies and flying and taking trips and doing what it is that we need to do to keep the economy functioning." And while he did get back to his busy schedule, he'd err on the side of caution when it came to flying so soon after these events, opting out of flying to London for the Mobile Awards, where Dionne Warwick was set to present him with that year's Lifetime Achievement Award. Instead, he'd film his acceptance speech ahead of time and just chill out right where he was at. But he went more in depth on the events of 9/11 and how he felt about his career in an interview that I'll leave in the description if y'all want to listen to the full thing. But in the wake of the events, Michael Jackson put together an all-star collaborative charity single called What More Can I Give that features several of the most popular artists in music at that time to raise funds for the survivors and families of victims of the 9/11 attacks. Luther would partake in the song and its accompanying music video, but plans for the release were scrapped, and the music video wouldn't see the light of day until October of 2003, making this music video the last to be released in Michael or Luther's lifetimes. But getting back to business, in October of 2001, Luther would sing the national anthem at the pregame show of the 49ers versus the Jets, which was light work for him, because he had already sang the national anthem at the Super Bowl back in 1997. Later that month, he'd embark on a full production of his Take You Out tour, which he had done a few spots of during his promo tour earlier in the year, but they needed to build a new stage set, with new wardrobe and the whole nine. Luther liked to go all out for his shows, but by now things were in full swing. The US leg ran until the end of the year, and at the top of 2002, he would appear alongside many R&B artists at the United Negro College Fund's Evening of Stars, which took place in Dallas. A few days later, he would appear at the 2002 AMAs, where he won Best Male Artist, Soul R&B, and he performed the tribute portion, covering 2 songs by the recently deceased Beatles member George Harrison, whose demise I covered in another video. And while Luther was performing, pictures of prolific celebrities who lost their lives in the year 2001 would appear in the background.
I love you back.
I want to thank the producers on the record and all the people who helped get us through this. I'm glad. I never went away, but I'm glad to be back. Good night. Thank you. Yay.
Luther would go on to be featured in an episode of Touched by an Angel, where his character always wanted to sing, but took the safer route of becoming a custodian instead. He'd spend his entire life playing it safe, only to realize his true talents that shined in the end. His character would then sing his version of The Impossible Dream on the show, along with a duet with Della Reese's character. Luther would later partner up with Burger King for the BK Got Music Summer Soul Tour, that also featured Gerald Levert and Angie Stone. Man, life is surreal. But also, Michelle Williams from Destiny's Child was making her gospel debut, so she'd get the crowd hype in the beginning with praise and worship. Then after this tour wrapped, Luther would embark on the European leg of his Take You Out tour. 2002 mostly focused on Luther just touring so much, and it took a toll on him, but he was dealing with other things in his personal life too around this time. Now, it's been said by people who were close to Luther that going into 2001 he had a new love interest, but due to him keeping his love life private, the details of that relationship are not known to the public. What is known is that by 2002 that romance had fizzled out, and Luther had returned to his source of comfort, which was food. Throughout his career, his weight had fluctuated frequently, as he had gotten the willpower and discipline to keep a strict diet whenever he set his mind to it, but put that same amount of passion and energy into reverting back into old habits whenever he was stressed.
The more stressed he got, the more he ate. But then the more he ate, the worse he would feel about himself. And therefore, the more stressed he got. And it was this vicious cycle, I think, that we see played over and over again.
His fans had gotten used to his yo-yo dieting and subsequent differences in appearance over the years. When he'd pop out, you didn't know if you were going to get skinny Luther or big Luther. He had also suffered from diabetes and hypertension, which ran in his family. But back in 2000, shortly before he signed to J Records, he had announced that he was free of diabetes.
I made history.
That you had expired, but obviously you're not, and you're in great shape now.
No, people, it's so funny. Everybody wants to attribute the weight loss to either being sick or something like that. I'm great. I've never been in better health. I'm no longer diabetic. I no longer have high blood pressure, and that's due to the weight loss. So people should know that there's an improvement in your health when
It's terrific. I mean, you and I have done this thing several times over the years.
Yeah.
What's the high you've been, and what are you now?
I was about 340.
You were 340.
I could have wrestled Hulk Hogan to a definite draw.
But by late 2002 and into early 2003, he had gained everything back and then some. But again, audiences were used to seeing Big Luther, Lil Luther, so it came across as him entering into another one of his big eras. But Luther had been hyper-focused on what he felt were bigger issues at hand. Throughout 2002, he was underwhelmed with the fact that his latest album had only won him one award, no Grammys or anything like that, and still no recognition outside of the R&B category. Now, he did win an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Male Artist, a title that he holds the most awards in, mind you. But this had become standard for Luther, and wasn't anything groundbreaking. He expressed in several interviews with Ed Gordon, Craig Seymour, and Tim Lampley that no one he had signed with yet had been able to help him achieve the crossover success that he was aiming for.
Are you happy? It depends. It also depends on when you ask. Asking right now, no, not particularly. No, it's too much work that yields too little result from my assessment of it all. Bothers me the most is trying to get people in my immediate midst to understand my desire to sing the music I sing and have it cross over into the mainstream, as well as being urban, to cross over to the mainstream in the same ways that Lionel Richie did, in the same way that Aretha Franklin did, that Dionne Warwick did, you know.
Right.
And no one that I've met has, you know, yet really accomplished that.
I feel that the audience that I have live is disproportionate with the people who buy the records, and the radio stations that my record companies get to play the records. You know, they focus it on R&B, which, hey, that's my world. Right. That's my thing. That's in my chromosomes. That's a given. You know what I'm saying? You know, that's my passion. So, okay, that's great. We know we have to do that. Right. You know, but now what about the rest of the world that loves this art form too? Right. You know, I'm not putting on a blonde wig to cross over. You know, so it's got to be on the same, you know, there's got to be an effort to do it, you know, based on the people who are the vehicles for the record.
This had low-lying implications that he was unhappy with his latest venture at J Records. But due to the terms of his agreement, he couldn't just up and quit the same way he left Virgin Records after just one album. He would go back into the studio and put together a second album for J Records, this time taking the reins with himself being the main producer and having multiple guest features, which was the opposite to his last album, in which Clive handpicked a ton of producers and had no guest features outside of Luther's background vocalists. And after his two-night show at Radio City Hall in February, which would be his last set of live performances, it was crunch time, and the label was said to have been hounding him to get this record complete. But Luth had just one more song to put together, one that he wanted to dedicate to his father, who he was named after and who was also a singer, but died from diabetes when Luther was only 8 years old. Luther was the baby of the family and didn't have too many memories of his father, but one in particular he harped on, saying in a statement that this memory is of my mother and father dancing to some Baby Washington songs with me right there, and the memory of that moment has hovered around me throughout my life ever since. Luther always remembered the joy of these moments, when his dad would dance with him and his mother, and he also remembered just how much his father's passing affected his mother, and how even up to this point in his life, he prays for her even more than himself.
I pray for her even more than me.
As by now, all of his older siblings had passed away due to health-related complications. It was just him and his mother left. He had never put together a tribute for his father before, but he felt the biggest inspiration to do it now more than ever on his upcoming 14th album. He reached out to his good friend, singer/songwriter Richard Marx, who he had comforted after the sudden loss of his own father, to help him craft together the right words and melody for the track, which he'd call Dance With My Father.
6 years later, I lost my father very tragically as a result of a car accident. And I was 33, and I was just in a complete tailspin for months and months. I didn't just lose my dad, I lost my best friend. It was Luther who called me one night, and we talked on the phone for about 2 hours. And he just knew what to say, and it was a turning point. Flash forward maybe 6 more years later, he had just the title. And he called me and he said, I want to write a song with you called Dance With My Father. I remember when he recorded it, he called me and he said, this is the most important song of my career. This is my Piano Man. This is my signature song.
After making some modifications to the track and doing his own production and vocal layering, Luther knew that this track was his career song, one that he would sing at every live show for the rest of his life, and was going to be the one that catapulted him to the mainstream, all in the name of his father, a name that he had carried all along. Unfortunately, Luther would never get the chance to perform the song, as just 10 days after he completed this song, which was the last song recorded for the album, he would suffer a severe stroke on April 16, 2003. According to his report, hypertension and mismanaged type 2 diabetes is what likely led to a blood vessel rupture in his brain. While in the hospital, he also contracted meningitis and pneumonia. He had to get a tracheostomy tube inserted to help him breathe. The entire ordeal left him in a coma for almost 2 months. When he regained consciousness, his ability to speak was greatly impacted, and he was refined to a wheelchair for a long time. His mother, extended family members, and close friends were by his side throughout it all. One of his close friends, singer Patti LaBelle, along with his mother, would do several interviews giving status updates from time to time. In speaking to the press, his mother explained that the stress of trying to complete the album and overeating pushed his diabetes to the dangerous level that caused the stroke. She said that a few days before it happened, he had visited her, and she was worried about him because he was eating everything in sight. She asked him, "Are you upset about something?" And he said, "I don't know, but when you go to your mama's house, you're supposed to eat." She said he regained his weight back, and that of course really bothered me tremendously because I knew how hard he was struggling not to gain the weight back, and yet he would eat uncontrollably. I got annoyed one time and asked him, "Why do you do this to yourself again?" And he said, "I don't drink, I've never drank, I've never smoked, I've never done drugs. Mama, I just don't know what to do anymore." Patti LaBelle chimed into the interview saying, "Sometimes when stressed, my sugar goes up." Luther kept all of his tears inside. He never cried it out. Meanwhile, J Records went on ahead and packaged the new album, releasing it before Luther regained full consciousness. They titled it Dance With My Father, which was what he wanted to do in the beginning, but before his stroke they were initially hesitant to name it that. But they honored his wishes and had sent the song Dance With My Father to radio stations as the lead single just 2 weeks after his stroke. And the song would go on to become everything that Luther envisioned. The song's touching subject matter struck an instant emotional chord with the public. That, coupled with all the press surrounding Luther's hospitalization, led to many stations being flooded with emails and weepy phone calls, as the song became one of the most requested songs added to pop radio. That's right, this song had become the one to cross the threshold, charting in 10 countries, going platinum in the States, the UK, and New Zealand, and eventually earning Luther Song of the Year at the 2004 Grammy Awards, and it would be one of 4 Grammys that he'd win that night. The music video was filmed in the summer of 2003. However, Luther wouldn't be present for this one. Instead, it would feature collages of famous friends and fans from all different communities, music, sports, Hollywood, paying special homage to their own fathers. Special highlights included Beyonce dancing with her father, Matthew Knowles, Stevie Wonder with his family, Quincy Jones, the Wayans brothers family, pics of Monica, Whitney Houston, Ashanti, Brandy, and Celine Dion with all of their fathers, among many others. Towards the end, Garcelle would appear, along with a special handwritten letter to Luther, expressing her love for him and hope to see him again. The video also contained childhood photos of Luther, along with pics of his mother and father before his passing back in 1959. The music video would become one of his first to air across all music networks. Dance With My Father, the album, would be released on June 10, 2003, and there would be no promo tours or live performances from Luther for this era, for obvious reasons. Essentially, all the promotion for this project was tied into the media coverage on his hospitalization, his health status, and the many candlelit vigils held in his honor. Such extreme public interest caused the album to debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200, becoming his first and only album to do so, and it would be certified platinum in just a month's time, making it his fastest selling album, and eventually it went double platinum in the States. In showcasing his growth and ability to adapt to the musical climate of 2003, this new album would contain more elements of hip-hop and would feature a few rappers as well, although Luther kept his contemporary R&B sound ever so present throughout the 14-track CD, and we finna get into its guts, opening with the ultimate friend zone anthem, If I Didn't Know Better, talking about his friendship with a super flirtatious woman who's in a relationship but isn't nearly as affectionate to her man as she is to Luther, who swears if he ain't know any better, he'd think they were more than friends, as she spends all her time with him over her man. But she's evasive and says, "I love you like a brother." The track ends without any resolve. Such is life for so many guys out there. It ain't a fun place to be, I'll tell you that. Track 2, Think About You, is one I completely forgot about until I heard that beat kick in, and when the chorus came in with "I was standing in the rain," and his background vocalist singing, "I thought about you. I was riding on a train. I thought about you. Feeling high like I seem to do. Every time I think about you." Man, when I heard that, all the memories came flooding back from that time. This song had been released as the album's second single, and the radio stations, especially the ones in North Carolina, couldn't get enough of that song. It went straight to number 1 on the adult R&B songs chart, and even though there was no video for it, the song went on to become the number 1 urban adult contemporary song of 2004, according to Radio and Records. I really wish we could have gotten to see and hear his live performances of this track. I just know he would have promoted the hell out of this one. He even shouted out his label mate Alicia Keys on one of the lines. Track 3 is The Lover's Quarrel, If It Ain't One Thing It's Another, featuring rapper Foxy Brown, and the two made an unlikely pair, but it worked for the record, as their characters, if you will, are at odds with one another and cannot coexist peacefully. Foxy announces that because it's a Luther song, she'll keep it light, but stands 10 toes down on her position as the slick-talking woman of the house, whose best defense is her mouth. Her words, not mine. Although I could have sworn I heard him tell her to shut up at one point in the song. This is the comedy track of the album. I think couples who like to argue will definitely appreciate this one. Track 4, Buy Me a Rose, is a cover of country singer Kenny Rogers' 1999 hit of the same name. This song offers more of a resolution, saying that if the man could read his woman's mind, she'd say, "Buy me a rose, call me from work, open a door for me, what would it hurt?" As you should never stop dating your woman, no matter how long y'all been together. Luther's version of this song would be released as the album's third single, and it managed to peak at number 13 on the adult contemporary chart. The last single from this album, however, was track 5, in which he and Beyonce would do a remake of Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway's duet, The Closer I Get to You. Now, the instrumentation in the beginning was like walking into a time machine that takes you back to all the positive emotions you've ever associated with love, especially that old school love, as is the case with many of Luther's songs. The addition of Beyonce's vocals adds that fresh new school sound, and the merging of the two was heavenly. This track would also appear on Beyonce's debut album, released just 10 days after Luther's, although reviews for that album claimed that the song sounded too dated and out of place on her project. But the reviews on Luther's album listed this stellar track as a standout, and it would win a Grammy for Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocals at the 2004 Grammys. Beyonce said when she was on the set of Dance with My Father that "I'm a part of this project because I got the wonderful opportunity to work with Luther. When I was in the studio with him, I fell in love. He is such a special person. I just want to be here for him. I've been praying for him, and I'm so happy that he is doing well." Track 6, Lovely Day, was a cover of Bill Withers' hit of the same name, though this version merged hip-hop and funk on a chilled, laid-back beat. It's all about kicking back and relaxing on this version. It features Busta Rhymes, who lays a quick verse, and his wordplay was on some "Today Was a Good Day" vibes. But those background vocalists take the cake on this track. They did that on the bridge and harmonies. Although for me personally, I prefer Lovely Day Part 2, which was the remix that came in at track 13 on this album, which featured not only Busta Rhymes, but also R&B trio Next, on a brand new beat, which was a sample of Say Yeah by the Commodores, but in the style of Tamia's So Into You, and you know you can't go wrong with that beat. Produced by Eddie F. and Darren Lighty, once again killing it, and I would argue that this track, track number 13, is the album's hidden gem. Now track 7 is the aforementioned title track. Track 8, She Saw You, is another one of my favorites. Now in the song, he couldn't vouch for his homie when he was questioning where his homie was at. His homie just so happened to be cheating with another woman, and he holds him accountable for it, saying, "It's not right. You were out there trying to be a player, and now your woman is gone." And the music on this one is more hip-hop themed. I read one review that said, "Man, this beat is so urban. More urban than much of his songs." He did that. He did that one for real. Track 9, Apologize, is another underrated banger with an interesting message. See, Luther is in a love triangle where he's giving the woman an ultimatum. It's either him or me. But Luther is the one with the money. And far too often in media and in movies, we're fed the narrative that the man who has nothing is the one who truly loves the woman, and that the man with money is just buying her love, but he don't really care about her like that. But Luther sings, "I don't want to have to apologize or give a damn. I don't appreciate being criticized for who I am. Just because I can buy you a lot of things or take you any place, that's just what money brings. He wants you to believe that I'm trying to buy your love, because that's what he would do if he actually had the money to do it."
My value system is a classic value system. I don't go for the, I'm not a bump and grindist, so I sing about romance and I sing metaphors and, about metaphor and beautiful things about falling in love. I never sing about making love. I always sing about falling in love.
Now his statement from that clip was from the last album. But look, Luther ain't come to play around on this album. Track 10, Hit It Again, has the man stricken with lust, singing, "I loved it the first time, sent chills up my spine. Deep emotion ain't got nothing to do with it, and being in love ain't really got anything to do with it. I hope you understand, but I can't worry if you don't. Oh no, if I can't double up, it's like I can't get enough. Call me greedy if you want, just do it." Now Queen Latifah comes in with her rap, which consists of going down the list of his itinerary, saying, "We ain't got time to be making love all day. You got this place to be, you got this person to see, we got stuff we gotta do." But in the end, they waste the day away, hitting it again and again and again. Track 11, Right in the Middle, talks about the balance of love and life, stating that there's going to be good and bad in both, and not to miss out on the good waiting for the other shoe to drop and for things to be bad again. Track 12, Once We Were Lovers, finds Luther and his woman estranged and trying to get back to loving one another. Stevie Wonder had a very memorable harmonica solo towards the end. Stevie later said about Luther, "It is an expression of love and appreciation that I have for him. It's just an honor to know him and for us to be friends." The last track, They Said You Needed Me, details his lover breaking things off with him, and over time expresses that she's doing just fine without him, though her friends tell quite a different story, saying that hey, she'll never admit it, and we hate to see her going through it, but she needs you. With the beautiful music to complement it, it was a great way to end the album. And given the greater context of Luther's life story, this song would essentially be his final offering before his passing, as we the fans will never not need Luther. And with him being gone, we're still going through it. All in all, Dance With My Father was an amazing album. And though the lead single and title to the album pulls at one's heartstrings, it's not a sad album like one might expect. I actually like this one better than the last one, and it makes me wonder just where his music would have evolved to next. It seemed more like Luther was in the full swing of things and was finding good footing in the 2003 musical era, but this damn stroke just got in the way of everything. And by the fall of 2003, Luther was alert, moving, talking as best he could, and even singing a little bit. Patti LaBelle told People magazine that he was in rehab, having 5 hours of therapy a day on most days. She said his voice is the same as it ever was. He's back. She said his mind was sharp enough to correct her lyrics whenever they were rehearsing a song together. At this point, he was learning how to get in and out of a car and doing physical exercises to regain his strength, along with mental puzzles like crosswords and playing blackjack. But still, it was quite apparent that things just weren't the same. And because he was unable to tour, and it was uncertain if he'd ever be able to do a live performance again, around this time J Records decided to release his last live performances that he did back in February, on an official album called Live at Radio City Music Hall 2003. As there hadn't been any live albums in Luther's discography, and this would provide new fans who were never able to catch one of his shows the opportunity to experience a mere snapshot of his vocal theatrics in a setting outside of the studio. This live album got rave reviews and reached number 6 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart. When it came time for award season, Dance With My Father racked up a ton, starting with the 2003 AMAs, which had now moved from being held in January to being held in November. There he was honored as Best Male R&B Performer and won Favorite Soul R&B Album. And while Luther wouldn't be able to travel to the awards, his mother, who was 80 years old, would accept these awards on his behalf.
I'm so very sorry that Luther cannot be here tonight in person, but I'm here to represent him and to say thanks to all of you who made this possible, to the American Music Academy. Thank you.
In early 2004, he won 4 NAACP awards, not just for his standard Outstanding Male Artist Award that he always won, but this time, Dancing With My Father won Most Outstanding Song, Most Outstanding Music Video, and Most Outstanding Album. And the most prestigious awards came at the 2004 Grammys, where Luther earned 5 Grammy nominations, winning 4 of them, taking home Best Male R&B Vocal Performance, Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocals, Best R&B Album, and the most coveted Song of the Year, which Richard Marx, who co-wrote and co-produced, would accept on behalf of them both. Now Richard would play the piano while Celine Dion, who had just lost her own father, would perform a rendition of Dance With My Father, as its message was universal, and that performance was a tearjerker. Man. Also, Alicia Keys partook in her own tribute for Luther, performing a rendition of his version of A House Is Not a Home, which was a cover he had done of Dionne Warwick's hit, which was released 40 years prior. Man, music is the gift that keeps on giving. But one star who was noticeably absent from the tribute was Janet Jackson, who was supposed to be a presenter and give the introduction, the same way she did for Aaliyah's tribute. And you know I'm gonna mention Baby Girl, y'all. It is what it is. You might as well get used to it. However, due to Janet's infamous nip slip during the Super Bowl halftime show just a week prior, she was blacklisted by CBS's parent company, Viacom, and her invitation to the ceremony was rescinded. Luther himself would pre-tape his acceptance speech, revealing himself to the world for the very first time since his stroke.
I wish I could be with you there tonight. I want to thank everyone and for your love and support. And remember, when I say goodbye, it's never for long, because I believe in the power of love.
Afterwards, he appeared on The Oprah Show, giving what would be his last interview.
You want to say to all of those fans?
I want to thank them for even caring.
You've come back from the dead. Every day do you say, I want to get a little better at something?
Well, right now, what I want to get better at may seem strange, but it's not. Living with this, living with these thoughts, living with this, feeling of the last chapter of a book.
Are you glad you lived?
I'm still living.
It was heartfelt and eye-opening to the severity of his situation. Initially, his niece didn't want him going on there, telling People magazine he did an Oprah interview, which I wasn't completely on board with, but my grandmother thought it would help other stroke victims to see that. He just wanted people to know that taking good care of your health is extremely important, and that having diabetes is not a joke and having a stroke from it is not either. He wanted everybody to do what they can to help themselves. Luther had put in so many long hours trying to complete the project that he didn't devote any time to maintaining his health. But you know what? As hard as he worked on this album, and even though in the end he didn't get to physically promote it or perform any of its songs, I'm thankful he got to see his body of work flourish and win accolades that he had never received before. I'm glad he was at least there to see the impact that it had on the public. His influence will remain constant in popular music, as by now it was hip-hop's turn to give back to Luther, with his samples and interpolations appearing in hits like Jay-Z and Pharrell's Excuse Me Miss in 2003, Jamie Foxx and Kanye's Slow Jams in 2004, and Bow Wow and Omarion's Let Me Hold You in early 2005, just to name a few. But hip-hop and R&B weren't the only genres paying tribute. A myriad of different artists across multiple genres will go on to release their own covers of Dance With My Father, and several musicians came together to record a jazz tribute album called Forever, For Always, For Luther, containing jazz covers of his popular hits, my personal favorite being Lettucey's cover of My Sensitivity. Of course, you had the never-ending rollout of greatest hits albums that kept coming, but there was also a greatest hits DVD of sorts containing music videos of his popular hits, with behind-the-scene footage and additional commentary from his longtime collaborator, Nat Adderley Jr. One of his acquaintances, Craig Seymour, who he had done numerous interviews with over the years, even wrote a biography book called The Life and Longing of Luther Vandross, which had been the most in-depth look into the life and career of Luther up to that point. This book was released on July 1st, 2004. Now, over the course of 1 year, as Luther was secluded from the public eye, he always kept his hope alive, according to his niece, who said during that time that he was ill, there was always constant singing going on. Not just between he and I, but all of his friends were coming around. There were rehearsals. Doing that was kind of a therapy session all the time. Having singers around and just acting like they were preparing for a tour. He was all into that. She said that throughout it all, Luther, who the family called Uncle Ronnie, never stopped singing. Even in his final days, he was singing up to the last minute. But on July 1st, 2005, Luther would suffer a heart attack that took his life, marking the end of an incredible talent that the world will never see another one of.
I was so stunned to hear about his death, I think as were so many of his fans, because there had been indications that he was getting better. What happened?
Believe me when I say, it is as much a shock to me as it is to anyone, but about, I say 3 weeks before his death, I went to visit him, and when I got ready to leave, there was a difference.
A good way? A good difference or not?
It was strange. It was very strange. And I called his manager and I said to him, Carmen, I think I'm losing my son.
Luther died with no descendants and without ever receiving the romantic love that he so often sang about. Due to his sexual orientation, the partnerships he did have, he kept from the public, as he didn't want to disappoint his fans. But those relationships never panned out in the long run. So songs like So Amazing, where he sings, "Love has truly been good to me. Not even one sad day or minute have I had since you've come my way," were words that he'd hoped to experience for himself, and I hate that he never got to have that. But his friends and family made sure to give him a stellar homegoing service, with his funeral being held at Riverside Church in New York City on July 8, 2005. In attendance were many prominent industry singers like Aretha Franklin, Patti LaBelle, Stevie Wonder, Dionne Warwick, and Cissy Houston, in addition to many fans who lined up and stood out in the pouring rain to pay their respects to the famous Dr. Love. 2 months later, his label put out So Amazing, an all-star tribute to Luther Vandross, which featured a ton of artists from Teddy Pendergrass, Angie Stone, and Mary J. Blige to Celine Dion, Elton John, among others, performing covers of Luther's hits. Aretha Franklin won a Grammy for her rendition of A House Is Not a Home, and Stevie Wonder and Beyonce won a Grammy for their cover of So Amazing. The following year, J Records put out a re-release of Luther's greatest hits album called Ultimate Luther Vandross. This new version featured a brand new single called Shine, a song that Luther had recorded for possible inclusion in the Fighting Temptations movie, which he references in the song. But at the time, it didn't make the final cut for the film or the soundtrack, so it remained in the vault. At the time it was released, J Records decided to put together a music video for the song, featuring young kids in a throwback setting, as clips from Luther's past videos are shown throughout the visual. Another unreleased song that made its way onto the compilation was called Got You Home, which was originally a part 2 of his hit Take You Out, picking up where the song left off. At this point, the woman has accepted his offer, they've spent time, went on a few dates, and now he's got her home for the first time. Why this song didn't make it onto the 2001 album is insane to me. This song is amazing, so much so that it would be nominated for a Grammy for Best Male R&B Performance at the 2007 Grammys, though it lost to John Legend's Heaven Only Knows. Now, Luther's mother, Mary, held a few events in his honor before she herself died in 2008. That same year, Luther was ranked number 54 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of 100 greatest singers of all time. And I'm glad that Rolling Stone acknowledged him. Number 54, huh? Luther was 54 years old when he died. In 2012, he would be posthumously awarded his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 2021, for what would have been his 70th birthday, the Google search engine featured a cartoon tribute of Luther, and even threw together an animated video of Luther singing his smash hit, Never Too Much, and showing its long-lasting impact on listeners worldwide. In 2023, his estate released a remastered version of Dance With My Father for the 20th anniversary, along with a full re-release of his live album, featuring 20 songs, whereas the original only featured 11. In 2024, rapper Kendrick Lamar and singer SZA released a duet titled Luther, which sampled him and Cheryl Lynn's version of If This World Were Mine. And this new song would spend 6 weeks at number 1 on the Hot 100, keeping Luther's influence steady and relevant 20 years after his demise. Also in 2024, Sony would drop yet another greatest hits album, featuring an unreleased version of the Beatles' hit Michelle that had been vocally and musically Lutherized. Luther recorded this cover around 1989, but it wouldn't be made available to the public until 35 years later. This greatest hits package also served as a soundtrack to CNN's official documentary on Luther's life and career, titled Never Too Much, that will be made available to watch on all streaming platforms in 2025. This year, the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles will put on the Luther Vandross Artistry and Elegance exhibit, which features hand-beaded suits and jumpsuits worn by Luther and his background singers during the Power of Love tour in 1991, and tuxedos and gowns worn during 1993 to 1994 performances. The exhibit also features 6 out of his 8 Grammy Awards. Now, according to some publications, when you listen to Dance With My Father, what you're hearing is Luther's last vocal performance on any record, as it's widely believed to be his last recording before his stroke, after which there would be no more. However, many other publications list his cover of Dave Barrett's One Shining Moment as the last song he had recorded before the stroke. Now, this song plays at the end of every NCAA March Madness tournament, every year at the end, while it showcases the winning team and its highlights. Over the years, a few artists have had their versions used, but Luther's remains the most prominent and widely known. David Barrett couldn't believe he got Luther to cover one of his songs, saying, "This is why I love America, actually, because you have this transcendent African-American singer singing a song by a white guy from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and it works. It just sort of straddles all these worlds, and he does it so effortlessly." Luther's voice and music transcends time, race, nation, religion, you name it. And he might not have received all the accolades he deserved, but he still left a long-lasting impression on music, love, and relationships. Rest in peace to Luther Vandross, his mother, his father, and his siblings. This is Justified by Jury. Y'all know how to hit that like, and y'all know how to hit that subscribe. If you want to, do so, and I'ma catch y'all in the next video.